Thank you, Senator Duran. I am David Kopel. I am an adjunct professor of advanced constitutional law at Denver University, Stern College of Law, research director of the Independence Institute, just a few blocks from here. But as always, professors from DU and as well as Independence Institute scholars speak on their own behalf and not for any organization. A study by the National Institute of Justice that was conducted in December. The National Institute of Justice is the research arm of the United States Department of Justice. And they did a report on a variety of gun control proposals that were in the air. The NIJ report was kept secret, but has been leaked and is now available to the public. The NIJ report regarding universal background checks said they are unenforceable unless you have universal gun registration. That as a practical matter, you know, if Senator Harvey sells me a gun, how is anybody ever going to find out or know, or anybody gets in trouble for doing that, even if we evaded the background check? Of course, he's such a law-abiding guy, that would never happen, but in this hypothetical, unless there's a government database of all firearms. As I'm sure all of you know, registration is very fiercely opposed by gun owners because it has historically, in New York City and in other countries, been used for gun confiscation. Canada attempted to impose universal gun registration in the 1990s. It ended up costing literally 100 times more than it was supposed to, and was finally repealed in 2012 by the Parliament there. What Captain Kelly and others have testified about is a much more limited concept than what this bill is. If, let's say, this is the amount of firearms sales that take place in Colorado, and there's some fraction of them that are not from firearms retailers. Now, this 40% figure is thrown out. That's not really true. But let's say we know for sure it's more than 1%. There's some tangible amount of firearms sales that are in this smaller category of non-retail sales. And that's what this bill has public support for in addressing. When you ask people about universal background checks, they're talking about addressing whatever this is, this between 1% and 40% amount. The problem is this bill, which is what you're going to be voting on, not answering a poll question about the concept, is about this. It's about firearms transfers. I have never sold a gun in my life, and I hope I never will because I like all my guns and I want to keep them. But I've engaged in probably hundreds of firearms transfers as this bill defines them. The definition of transfer is so broad, and it's written, it's a copy of a federal bill written by Michael Bloomberg's lobby, is so hugely overbroad compared to what the issue of actual sales is. The Colorado Supreme Court in Lakewood versus Pillow unanimously, under Colorado's constitutional right to arms in 1971, threw out a Lakewood ordinance that restricted gun transportation. And the court said unanimously that of course Lakewood can enact laws, safety laws about the transportation of guns, but what you banned here is so overbroad compared to the legitimate problem that could be addressed. This is a law that says I can give my wife a gun for Christmas, so it's not part of the war on Christmas, but it says when I'm out of town and she wants to use my gun, she's got to go through a background check, and in fact she can't go through the background check because I'm out of town and we both have to show up with the firearms dealer, and then when I come back to town, we got to go through the background check again so she can hand the gun back to me. It's a bill that says that I, as a NRA certified firearms instructor, when I'm, sorry. Carl Rove just won't leave me alone. It's when I say, when I teach a firearm safety class, not at a shooting range, because I typically don't. You go to the range later, it's the last part for the live fire practice. When I'm teaching in a classroom, following the NRA protocol for handgun safety instruction, which we're going to, in Senator Cockcroft's bill, helps get us back to that for licensed carry. when I hand somebody, I'm supposed to bring in firearms, unloaded, for the students to handle. The rule is absolutely no ammunition in the room, not even my own. And we have dummy practice ammunition, orange inert things, with which the students practice loading and unloading the guns, pressing the trigger, things like that. And over the course of that, you may have 4 or 5 different guns that get handed around. Every one of those is a transfer and is supposed to go, under this bill, we're supposed to go to a federal firearms licensee, do the background check that takes between 3 minutes and 9 days, depending on what time of year it is, and pay this $20 thing. It makes teaching quite impracticable. The provision for giving somebody a gun in an emergency is written so that it only applies when you could shoot somebody. And of course, by then it's too late. So if I have a neighbor who wants to borrow a gun one night because there have been a lot of burglaries in the neighborhood, and this is on page 5, line 15. If the neighbor wants to asks to borrow my gun because she's a single woman with some small children, and there's been a lot of burglaries in the neighborhood, can she borrow one of my guns for a couple nights till she can go to a store on Monday and maybe buy one of her own? A, I can't lend it to her unless I go over to her house, which seems kind of crazy that she has to come to my house. But B, more importantly, I can't transfer it to her unless she is in imminent fear of death or serious bodily injury. Well, that's the point at which she could shoot somebody. So if some guy's stalking her and making harassing phone calls, that doesn't mean that if she sees him at a shopping center, she gets to shoot him right away. But it does give her good cause for wanting to have that firearm in her home temporarily in an emergency, and that's prohibited. It's likewise, by the way, this DC, New York drafted bill doesn't even take into account that there's other circumstances in which the use of a firearm for self-defense is lawful in Colorado in the home. What our so-called Make My Day law allows defensive gun use in the home in situations other than imminent death or serious bodily injury. It's against any violent intruder in the home under Colorado law. So even someone who could lawfully use the gun right that instant still can't get it under this law. This phrase, you see it on line 15, which appears in a variety of places, unlicensed transferee, makes no sense in Colorado law. We have licenses to carry guns, but this isn't about carry, this is about possession. Unlicensed transferee would only make sense if we had a law that you had to have a license to own a gun in the first place in Colorado. So I looked for where this came from, and it's from the U.S. House of Representatives bill that is the Michael Bloomberg flagship bill. The language was cut and pasted into here, and it's it was a transplantation that doesn't really work. It doesn't fit from one to the other. It made sense in the context of as it was used in the other bill. It doesn't here. The core problem is that it's not just about sales, it's about the transfers in general. I've outlined just a couple of the problems. There are many, many, many more. A thing you could do which would significantly improve it is in E, line 19. The transfer is a temporary transfer of possession without transfer of ownership or title to ownership, and they just cut it there and remove the rest of E. And then you make the bill just about temporary transfers, rather than what this E is written is temporary transfers when you're actually at a target shooting range or where you're actually in the field while engaged in hunting. That would certainly solve a great deal of the problems with the bill. But what I would really suggest is that don't vote on this bill today. Take a day or two, and we'll move as fast as you want, to sit down with myself, with the sheriffs, with other legal experts who know and understand Colorado firearms law, and we can work with you to produce a bill that accomplishes everything the sponsors have promoted as the good part of this bill, which is sales between people who don't know each other and are not going through a licensed firearms dealer. Now, at the end of the day, there may be still philosophical disagreements about that bill, but that will be a bill that accomplishes what it intends to accomplish. Because if it goes through the way it is, what you're doing is, because of this definition of transfers, it is so broad, that you will, in effect, criminalize virtually the entire gun-owning population. It means that when I sit down with my son at the dining room table and say, here's my gun, here's how to use it, it's unloaded, but I'd like you to handle it and use it, that's supposed to be a transfer here too. There are so many things. The normal ways that people own their guns is to have temporary transfers, or your friend comes over and says, oh, you got a new gun. Can I take a look at it? Sure. And I hand it to my friend and he looks at it for 5 minutes and hands it back. That's a transfer here too. And you're turning all these people into criminals and say, well, the DAs would be too smart to enforce that. Hopefully, yes, but one, as those of us who remember Don Milkey from the olden days might know, you can't always count on DAs always having good judgment about what to prosecute. And this is a bill that's being written to be obeyed. We want people to obey the laws in Colorado. You don't want to create in Colorado a culture of saying, oh, well, what are the gun laws? I just moved here from Oklahoma, what are the gun laws? Oh, well, there's this gun law that says this is when you can carry a gun in public. That gun law really counts. You better get a carry permit. Oh, this gun law says this is when you can transfer a gun. Oh, yeah, that's ridiculous. They didn't know what they were talking about when they passed it. That's way overbroad. Nobody enforces that one. Let's have all the laws be fair, well-written ones that can be enforced. And I ask you to do this in the spirit of my father as a state representative in the 70s, before I'd convinced him that the Second Amendment and the right to arms were important civil rights, when he would have voted for any gun control bill on a conceptual basis, but would also insist that any law he voted for, especially any criminal law, had to be fairly written, properly drafted, and something that the people of Colorado could, in a fair and legitimate way, be expected to obey. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kopel. Oh, my microphone was off. Thank you so much. Is there any questions from the committee? Senator Carter.
One quick one.
You're so inquisitive today.
You mentioned several times the Bloomberg effect on this bill here. Is that written into any New York law that you are aware of? Or any law in any state for that matter?
Mr. Kopel.
Oh, well, yeah, for example, this New Jersey thing about like when your friend comes over and can he hold your gun, that's illegal in New Jersey, for example.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not a question, but David, I appreciate your comments on the transfer part, because we had, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 witnesses come in and testify for the bill. Every one of them spoke to the private sale of firearms. And whenever I brought up the question of the transfer to a person that I asked it to, they said, I have not read the bill, but we're against the private sale. So I'm glad that you were able to speak to those specific issues about the transfer and what a conundrum that might be. So thank you.
Thank you.